good morning and welcome to Kusile Breakfast. Thank you so much for waking up with us. It is 6 o'clock on the dot. Naqala kwehlelo lethu lomhla ekseni sisamithi nivuka kahle lo muhla. Simakho nje ukuthi nikhethe kuvuka nathi siluhlele iKusile Breakfast Show. You can also watch us on YouTube ku Eswatini TV lenvuselako ngulungelele makagula. It is the 16th May of 2023. Sesivele siyawaphetha umnyaka sifisa sasele kancane. We're halfway through the year 2023. How do you do this morning?
Doing very well. Happy to be blessed and alive on the 5th month of the year.
Yep.
Halfway through the 5th month of the year, the month of May. It is indeed a blessing, Lungelele, and just to thank God. Ongamalanga ekseni nansamba before ulale Lord, I hope you attend us. The blessing of life. I certainly thank him every day for the blessing of life. What we have on the show today, I'm sure Makaya. We are honored again, to have the Senate President, Pastor Lindiwe Dlamini, that join the official opening of the 10th retreat of the Association of Senates, Shura, and Equivalent Councils of Africa and the Arab world. It commenced on a very high note. It also has a convention center, Ezulwini. So mhla tilishumi nakunye kuya mhla tilishumi nakutsatfu kule nyanga lesetulu lapho khona ke lo mhlangano siubonile ukuthi ugcine nge-excursion on Saturday mhla ka-14. Sibonile lo mhlangano lona umhlangano lo wende nje livela kangwane laphithitela kakhulu with activity following the COVID-19 pandemic. There are whole time activities lamanengi internationally. Ukhulumile ke Senate President bayakhuluma nawe Lungelele aveta nje indzaba yokuthi this meeting is going to be very important. Ekutheni performance not for wemave as Africa, the mave Arab world. Ekutheni batawukhulumisa tindzaba the legislation, bakhulumisa tindzaba to respond to green green economy, responding to climate change. A green economy lengeke nje green economic path but letawuba sustainable. Ekutheni ihlangabete na indzaba lenkhulu le part of ngathi the most urgent global issues lapha emhlabeni kulamalanga lokuyi climate change. We will talk to yenake Senate President Pastor Lindiwe Dlamini. Tasichazela kabanzi ukuthi after all the deliberations, are they happy with this meeting? Was it a success? What are the legislations about passing? And the word is Lungelele, there was a memorandum of understanding that signed where lamcwa kakhulu. So we hope that our figure our unpack now lamhla lapha ehlelweni.
Yes, kukumbula nje ukuthi inhlangano yaseCast kumele ukuthi ya-establish even lase-Yemen ngeminyaka wa 2004 ngenyanga yamabasa ke i-compriser of emavela ngo-22 lafaya kuwona live lase-Eswatini, live lase-Morocco, emavela afaya eKhathi, Saudi Arabia, Egypt kanje kanye ne-Algeria nalamanye emave la khona lapha esifundeni se-Africa. Utateka kabanti ke sifiso naye Senate President Pastor Lindiwe Dlamini at 7:30 namhla ekseni. Siphinde sibuke letanga phandle kwakuleli tindzaba sibone simo nje semgwaqo ukuthi ingabe sime kanjani lo mhla ekseni sisaqala langa kwamanje asibahlete emakethe sitabene tindzaba tifuthi eSwatini.
Why should we pay our TV license?
The content on our local television is actually more up to date. The industry is enhanced.
It is a criminal offense not to pay your TV license and attracts a fine of 500 emalangeni or 6 months imprisonment.
And the industry is definitely blooming, ladies and gentlemen. So that's what we have for you. But we'll be right back just after the break and we'll give you more of Missed Fee.
Pay my TV license. That's why I can enjoy the benefits of an enhanced industry and keep track with recent transformation.
Mommy, who pays for a TV license and what are they paying for?
The owners of TV set and a gadget with a tuner like DVD set have to pay.
Pay your TV license at NetBank with the details provided on screen. Or use your cell phone via the mobile money Pay. You could also visit your nearest post office and pay there. Pay your TV license via Eswatini Mobile Imali. Any TV device retailer can purchase a license to trade. Pay your TV license and enhance the industry.
Imizuzu lesithupha kubumbene insimbi yesithupha lomhla ekuseni ake sithathe indzaba lapha ekhaya. Indvuna ekuhlela umnotfo nekutfutfukiswa kwawo Dr. Tambo Gina ithi inkulu inzima ledlalwa tinhlangano tamhlabuhlangene lapha eSwatini. Dr. Gina uthi letinhlelo atiyishiyeli ngephandle insha lapha eveni lokufaka ekhatsi ke umfana longumfana lobese kasalela emuva. Indvuna ikuvetela kwemhlanganweni nelihhovisi lamhlabuhlangene lapho bekubukwa tinhlelo talelihhovisi talonyaka.
Mhlabuhlangene uneluhlelo lokusebenta lweminyaka lesihlanu lapha eveni lolusuka eminyakeni wa-2021 njalo ngeminyaka uhlangana nelitiko letekuhlela umnotfo nekutfutfukiswa kwawo kubukisana ukuthi basahamba kahle yini kuletseni lusito eSwatini. Mhlanganweni walonyaka indvuna yetekuhlela umnotfo nekutfutfukiswa kwawo Dr. Tambo Gina itsite Mhlabuhlangene ubalulekile eMaswatini futhi kufanele ahlale adodane.
Lamhla ke sesihlangane lokubuka ukuthi sebahambe kanganani ukuthi kuletinto sinatendeke eveni emathuba emsebenzi kuthuthukisa insha nokuthi insha ibe nema skills ikhona ibe nemakhono ekusebenta kahle. Lonke leto tinto etinjalo ubuye kutekulima kuthi kunekudla eveni katangalale tiko nebantu labasebenta labangalimi bakhona ukuthi bakuthole kudla.
Lobukela ihhovisi lamhlabuhlangene lapha eSwatini George Wachira uthi lusito lamhlabuhlangene eSwatini alusiyo imali kuphela kodwa lufika nasekubonisaneni nahulumende kulokunengi.
The first component, which we call outcome, has to do with inclusive economic growth. Focus area number 2 is in terms of human resource capacities. The third area has to do with governance and institutions. The fourth area has to do with environmental sustainability.
Wachira uvetile ukuthi kubalulekile ukuthi inhlangano yabo ibambisane nahulumende kuze kusitakale eMaswati. Tindzabeni teSwatini TV kubika Thamnkosi Mavimbela navuma inkosi Nzinisa eMbabane.
Indvuna yelitiko lemisebenzi lemikhulu nekutfutsa sikhulu Ndlalihlaza Ndwandwe ithi litiko liyasibukisisa indzaba yokunciphisa imodolo emigwacweni. Indvuna ithi lokhu kutawendeka ngetinhlelo letifaka ekhatsi ukuthi bantfu basebentise tincola letitfwala sive njengemabhasi kanye nekusebentisa emabhayisikili. Indvuna beyikhuluma emhlanganweni wakamhlaba wekucinisekisa tekuphepha emigwacweni lebewubanjwe ngetekuchwephesha.
Umhlangano wakamhlaba wetekuphepha emigwacweni ubanjwa njalo ngemva kweminyaka lemibili kanti-ke inhloso yawo ukukhuthaza tekuphepha emigwacweni. Isicubulo salonyaka sikhuthata ukuthi-ke emave acabangisise ngetinhlelo tekuhamba. Ikhuluma kulo mhlangano lobe ubanjwe ngetebuchwephesha indvuna yelitiko letemisebenzi emikhulu nekutfutsa sikhulu Ndlalihlaza Ndwandwe sithi-ke imigwaco kufanele ibe yindzawo lephephile.
Kubukeka ukuthi tindlela tekunciphisa timotolo emgwacweni tingatsini letifaka ekhatsi kwekuthi kuleto tindzawo letihambekako bantu phela bangahamba ngemabhasi bahambe ngemakhumbi lapho batawuhamba bangumthamo lomkhulu khona titawuncipha letimotolo letiningi emgwacweni ngoba siyati ukuthi kwaba netimotolo letiningi emgwacweni ngilapho khona kubese netingoti tiyanza khona. Tikhona ke naletinye tindlela tekuhamba letitingatifaki timotolo nato lesitikhondelako lamgwacweni ukuthi mane nato tivuleleke tibeketeleleke labanye bahamba ngamabhayisikili noko lakithi ekhaya siyaye sithathe ukuthi libhayisikili lekudlala nalabaningi lesibabona konje sibabona abagibela bayodlala kanti kungilenye indlela lesingahamba ngayo kufaka ekhathi netidududu letincane kanti nekuhamba ngetinyawo nje secishe ngalokwanza kwetimoto akusesiyo into lesiyedayela noma libanga lelifishane umuntu sowungena emotini ngaleyo ndlela ke setiyanza timoto emgwacweni sewukhanza ukuthi netingiza ngaletingodi seliba setulu.
Indvuna ithi kuleli viki kutawube kuchubeka imikhankaso leyahlukene letawunciphisa kulimala nekushona-ke kwebantfu njengemigomo yemave latibekela wona ukunciphisa tingoti ngemnyaka wa 2030. Tindzabeni kubika Sondomlangeni titfombe ngithemba Shabangu ezulwini.
Sewucalile umhlangano lomkhulu wekusita insha itihlele ukuthi ngawatfola njani ematfuba ekutiphilisa ngemakhono kanye ke nelwati lenawo National Career Expo. Lomhlangano ubanjwe ngephansi kwesicubulo lesithi kusebenzisa emakhono nekucala emabhizinisi kuze kuthuthuke umnotfo etikhatsini tamanje. Lomhlangano ubanjelwe Hilton Garden in Mbabane.
Lo msebenzi wekusita insha ngetindzaba temisebenzi wesekelwe nguhulumende lofuna kubona insha yalapha eSwatini iphumelele ngayo yonke indlela. Kubonakalisa lokhu tindvuna letindzatfu lokunguleyo yetemfundvo, yetensha kanye naleyo yetisebenzi beti kulomcimbi kunika tfoloqina kubantfu labasha kutsi hulumende uyabesekela.
The Ministry of Education and Training is pleased to collaborate with sister sectors and to be part of this year's National Career Expo and today's launch, which affords our children the opportunity to a platform for dialogue where critical information from different academic and TVET institutions is shared in one platform.
With approximately 60% of our youth struggling to find jobs, such events are imperative as they give our youth a wide array of options to choose from when they decide on their career path. This Career Expo also focuses on areas where there are urgent challenges and exciting potential for young people to take action.
The Eswatini Career Expo is a national event that endeavors to close some of the gaps with the view to reduce the youth unemployment rate. The Expo wants to address the entrepreneurial skills and information gaps among the in and out of school youth and the marginalized youth as they prepare to explore their career options and the possible opportunities available to them in the job market.
The National Career Expo itawujikeleta etifundzeni totini telive solo kukhulunywa nensha ngamatfuba emisebenzi. Tindzabeni teSwatini TV kubika Themkosi Mavimbela. Inavuma inkosi Nzinisa eMbabane.
Umchumanisi wemkhankaso we-1 billion rising esifundzeni se-Afrika Xolani Hlatshwago sewukhutsate bomake kanye nensha kutsi babe ingcenye yetigaba tonke telukhetfo kute-ke bangatosalela ngemuva ekugcineni. Hlatshwago uthi solokucala ekubhalisa abayinhlangano bajabula ngelisasasa labomake labachubeka nekubhalisa.
Ngekusho kwembiko lokhishwa libandla letelikhetfo nemincele uveta-ke ukuthi ngemsombuluko ekuseni sivele sibhalisele lukhetfo besingetulu kwa 36,000 kanti-ke bomake lababhalisile balinganiselwa ku 16,000. Umchumanisi-ke wetinhlelo ka-1 billion rising esifundzeni se-Afrika Xolani Hlatshwago uthi-ke banelithemba lekuthi bomake batawuchubeka babhalise ngelinani elisetulu.
Si-1 billion rising njengoba live nyalo selingena elikhethweni. It's also an opportunity for women who have made their informed decision to participate. Kuti participate and we know the process. Kuti in every leadership position, kunema stages, kunema processes. So if they miss the first stage or the first process, batati kanza sebaluza labamake kuti bati kanze babe khona lapha elikhethweni. So sithi kumake lo wakhe isinqumo sekuthi ufuna kwakha ukuthi abe khona atimbanza kanye ekukhetheni labo laba sebuholini noma naye abasebuholini. So le step is lesi ngisona si very important nangabe akhele leso sinqumo leso.
Kubhalisa kubhekeke ukuthi-ke kwephethe mhla ka-14 June 2023. Etindzabeni kubika Sondomlangeni, nginaThemba Shabangu, Mathapha.
Live leSwatini beliyingxenye yemhlangano wekuthuthukisa temasiko lebewubanjelwe eveni leSweden. Achaza ngalo mhlangano umphathi waleli bandla lelibukete indzaba temakhono nemasiko Stanley Dlamini uthi kuvunyelwene ukuthi emave kufanele aqinisekise ukuthi imisebenti yebahlabeleli kufanele inganyatheli bantfu kanye nekuqinisekisa ukuthi bahlabeleli bathola lithuba lekukhangisa ngemakhono abo emaveni onke. Dlamini uthi baphathi bemabandla etemasiko baniketwe insayeya yokuthi banakisise ngeliso lelikhaliphile ukuthi emakhono abhadalelwa ngendlela lefanele.
Live leSwatini beliyingxenye yemhlangano wetemakhono lebewubanjelwe eveni leSweden. Umphathi welibandla letemasiko nemakhono kuleli Stanley Dlamini uthi kelenye yetindzaba letikhulunyisiwe tifaka ekhatsi indzaba yekubhadalwa kahle kwebantfu labenta emakhono.
Besikhuluma indzaba ye-artist mobility. Kutsi ayakhona yini ama-artist vele kuhamba cishe onke emave nekukhululeka angabekelwa imicabo letsite. Bese kutsi lenye ilungelo lema-artist lebese yikhuluma kulendzaba letsi ngabe vele ema-artist ayakhona yini ukuthi abhadaleke ngalendlela lekufuthi angabhadaleka ngayo kubuka imisebenzi yayo. Lokusho ukuthi kuyenteka kulamanye emave ukuthi nawuthi uyahlola ema-artist ayaperforma njengabhadaleka. Uthi uyahlola kulamanye emave ayabhadaleka imisebenzi yawo nama-royalties. Lokusho ukuthi nakadlaleka emisakatweni yakhona ngabe yakhona yini vele kubhadaleka. Lelungelo lelo nalo likhulunyisiwe nasile ekuhambeni. Bese kuthi yekugcina sibukuseneke ukuthi simave ngabe sisondelana kanjani ekutheni kungathi nakune-festival eTanzania ngoba thina bo-CEO sikanye kanye kube ne-festival eTanzania kufuna ukuthi i-CEO wabuka ukuthi ngabe bakhona yini bakangwane, ngabe bakhona yini baseLesotho, ngabe bakhona yini baseBotswana.
Lo mhlangano bowuhlanganise emabandla etemasiko emhlabeni wonke jikelele. Etindzabeni kubika Sondomlangeni titfombe titfolakale ekhasini letekuchumana le-Arts and Culture Summit.
Umbuso uyasiphikisa sicelo sekutokela ngephandle sesiboshwa lesalahlwa licala lekwephula umthetho wekugwema kwebiwa kwetimoto. Lesiboshwa sifuna inkantolo lenkulu ibeke eceleni isijubo senkantolo yamanje sekuthi yagwebe iminyaka lemithathu ngaphandle kwekuhlawula. Lo msolwa utshele inkantolo ukuthi wavuma lelicala ngobe bekuthuswe ukuthi lelicala luqhutshwa inkantolo yamanje esigodveni kanzi emaphoyisa amhlukubeta khona kuleso siteshi semaphoyisa nakacedza kumbopha.
Sibusiso Jonathan Khumalo walahlwa licala lekwephula umthetho wekugwema kwetshiwa kwetimoto. Khumalo wagwetshwa iminyaka lemithathu wanganiketwa lithuba lekuthi ahlawule yinkantolo yamanje kumathapha lesesiteshini semaphoyisa esigodveni. Khumalo sewufake isicelo lesiphuthumako enkantolo lenkulu lapho acela khona ukuthi lesijubo asibukwe kabusha. Lesiboshwa sithi savuma lelicala ngobe sasethukile ukuthi lelicala litekwa esigodveni lapho emaphoyisa amhlukubeta khona. Khumalo utshele inkantolo ukuthi bekede ummeli lokwamenda ukuthi avume lelicala angakacondzisisi ukuthi wendani. Khumalo utshele inkantolo ukuthi ke sewuvile ukuthi licala lekweba imoto lisho kuyeba ngenhloso yekwemuka umnikati impilo yakhe yonke. Khumalo wengete ukuthi yena lemoto wayithatha ngenhloso yekuyibuyisa ngemuva kwemalanga lamabili kuphela. Wengetene ukuthi ufuna kutokela ngephandle kuze atawukhona kungcwaba make wakhe lowashona ngakholwane eminyakeni lophelile. Khumalo utshele inkantolo ukuthi nguye yedwa longangcwaba make wakhe njengobe labanye bakubo abangenelani naye. Wengetene ukuthi make wakhe bekahlala endlini yahulumende nakashona. Ngumanje bantfu bayagcekeza kulendlu futhi nahulumende solo ufuna kukhishwe letimphahla kutongena lomunye umuntu. Umbuso uyasiphikisa lesicelo. Lo msolwa umelelwe nguKhumbulani Msibi. Ndzabeni Eswatini TV kubika Themkosi Mavimbela enkantolo lenkulu.
Lilunga lephalamende lenkhundla yasemfongwaneni Roy Fanorakis lithi livela kangwane lisemathubeni lamahle ukuthi lente kahle kutekulima njengoba ke linemanti nemhlabathi lomnyendi kakhulu lokhu likuvete uma livakashele umphakathi waseNfuntini ngaphansi kwenkhundla yaseMadlangempisi.
Wake waba yindvuna yelitiko letekulima ngeminyaka 1998 kuya ku-2002 lolunga lephalamende lenkhundla yasemthongwaneni Roy Fanorakis uthi balimi bakuleli bangaphila ngekulima kuphela uma bangalima lokulingene labangakhona kukunesa babuye nesivuno lesihle.
Aba lomuhle longalima ngoba yini ungahamba emave lamanye ukhanza umhlaba kude kunesomiso kunayini kude mandi kodwa la kangwane sinemfula sinemanti kuthi nje kulakithi nje ukuthi senta njani lokuningi nje isikhathi lokulima kwenda ukuthi siqashe abantu bonke abantu basebenze ungahamba eShayina kude lohlala bonke bayalima ngoba indawo lencane ngoba lenkudlana bonke bayalima bayaphila.
Fanorakis uthi balimi labanyenti kakhulu lapha kangwane baye babuke kulima ummbila nasetindzaweni lapho ungavumi khona kanti kuningi labangakulima baphume nesivuno lesingiso kuliwe nendlala kucoshwe ikati yetiko. Etindzabeni Eswatini TV ngibonga Simagagule Ethundini.
Ndzabeni temidlalo sibonza senhlangano ye-Eswatini Network of Women lophinze abe indvuna yetemtsetfo Pholile Shakhantu uthi bafisile ke kubona temidlalo etindzaweni letisemakhaya titfutfuka kanye nemali ledlalelwa bomake ifanana naleyo ledlalelwa bobabe. Shakhantu bekakhulumana ketfula timphahla tekudlala temacembu latongenela emancamo emidlalo we-netball enkhundleni yaseSigwe esifundzeni saseshiselweni.
Kutawube kusindwe ngebelithole enkundleni yaseSigwe ngesikhathi semacembu ladlala umdlalo we-netball ngaphasi kwalenkundla adlalela imali engu-100,000 emalangeni lesekelwe inhlangano ye-Eswatini Network of Women. Sibonza sale inhlangano ye-Eswatini Network of Women laphinze abe yindvuna yetemtsetfo kuleli Pholile Shakhantu uthi isikhathi ukuthi bomake badlalele imali lingana naleyo yabobabe sesifikile.
Bonile lokuthi tinkomishi nakudlalwa bobhuti bebadlalela emaligi ema-tournament kuphume imali letinkulu bese bodzathe ukhanze ukuthi kutawuthiwa nje ninedlalani nibe bo-curtain raiser kubete inkomishi leniyitfolako kubete imali leniyitfolako sithi-ke namuhla siye-Eswatini Network of Women lomncane wenu uyawuba inkulungwane nitawuba sive lesikhulu nani nibodzathe sisukumele loko si-Eswatini Network of Women lekungiyona inkundla yabodzathe yemadvodzakati ukuthi nawo abe nendzawo yawo lapho atawuchumana khona siphakamisane nathi sibomake.
Indvuna yetinkundla lophinze abelilunga lephalamende khona eSigwe ubulale emabhodlela kuyo lenhlangano ngakuthi bacale kusekela tetemidlalo enkundleni yeSigwe waphinze wethembisa ukuthi bantfu batotiphatha kahle ngalelilanga lemidlalo. Demhlanga Simelane longosihlalo wemidlalo we-netball endzaweni yakadikapol uthi baswele emagama ekubonga kuyo inhlangano ye-Eswatini Network of Women.
Sakubonga kakhulu kumake lasendele kona asathi nethi singabonga sithini but siphakamisa kubonga lokukhulu sisigwe sisho njalo nje sithi nawe sigwe awumncinyana. Lamacembu latongenela lamancama aphinza nikelelwa ngetembatfo labatagcoka nabadlala kanzi lemidlalo itodlalwa kulembela somvu lesiya kuyo mhla ka-20 kulenyanga lesetulo enkundleni yaseSigwe. Lobikela umsakathi Eswatini TV temidlalo ngilinda Dlamini naphathizwe Msibi eMbabane.
Umphathi wenkampani yaka-MTN Wandile Mtshali uthi lizinga lelikhonjwe ngemacembu aka-Premier League kulomnyaka losetulo webhola libe lihle kakhulu kungako ke champagne uze waphuma elangeni lekugcina lale midlalo. Mtshali bekakhuluma ngesikhathi licembu leGreen Mamba liphakamisa lendzebe enkhundleni yasemhlume ngemuva kwekuncoba kuRoyal Leopard ngamagoli 2-1.
Le qembu le-Green Mamba lizile ababoshampiyoni elanga lekugcina ngesikhathi linqoba ku-Royal Leopard ngamagoli 2-1 njengoba ne-Young Buffaloes nayo lebe yisolisa emathubeni ukuthi ingaphakamisa le ndzebe lokwentela abaningi batsanzi bemidlalo webhola kuleli babona ngathi lizinga lalomdlalo lenyukile kuleli. Lokho-ke kufaka ekhatsi nemphathi we-MTN lekungibo labasekela imidlalo ye-Premier League kanye ne-First Division lapha eveni.
It's just to congratulate i-Green Mamba ukuthi iwine le-Premier League, MTN Premier League kule season lephelako namhlanje. Siyababongela kakhulu. I think overall we've seen ama-games lamahle kakhulu kulomnyaka kule season and siyathemba ukuthi sisawulungiselela i-season letako imidlalo itawuqhubeka ibe sezingeni elisetulu. I think thina njenge-sponsor of the MTN Premier League, we are really proud of what we have seen. The standard of football has improved. Also the administration of football generally has also improved over the past season.
Umqeqeshi weqembu le-Green Mamba Ernest Mavuso lophakamisa indzebe yakhe ye-MTN Premier League kokuqala uthi basebente ngekutikhandla balicembu kanye nakapteni wakhe Mxolisi Mkhondvo.
We lost, we drew, we won. But sibambisene kuyo yonke leyo ndlela leyo. At times we had to push them beyond what they can take, beyond their comfort. Sometimes we demanded more than they can give. But besiluleka sibabona ukuthi bayakhona. Le trophy, it's my rebirth. It's a blessing to Green Mamba. I appreciate it very much. It's my first trophy. I'm happy.
Bende kakhulu behind the scene nabo coach. Badlali basho bakhombisile ukuthi imisela ikusuka icala isizini although zange saqala kahle, saqala kabi but sikhonile pick up ezisahamba isizini kuze kube nginamuhla. Sibonga yonke effort wonke lofake effort suka icala isizini kuze kube nginamuhla.
Iqembu le-Green Mamba lithole isigidzi semalangeni ngekuphakamisa lenzebe kanzi seliphakamisa lenzebe emahlandla lamathathu emlandzeni wabo. Lobikela umsakade Eswatini TV temidlalo ngilinda Dlamini eMbabane.
Tingakho lapha ekhaya sithatha simo selitulo sibahla let market natsibuya sicubeka nehlelo.
Provide a loving home through the official Banfa Bed for Child Foster Care program.
Foster care is the temporary placement of a child who is in need of care and protection. The child is placed in the care of a suitable person who is not the parent or guardian of the child. It involves bringing a child into your home to care for and nurture as the state-certified caregiver. You could be the foster parent that our children dream of. For more information, visit our website or give us a call.
Pay your TV license quickly and easily with MTN Momo. Simply dial *007 *3 hash and select option 8 for TV license. Enter your national ID number as your reference and the amount you wish to pay. Then enter your PIN to confirm your payment. Once your payment has been made, you'll receive a confirmation SMS of your payment. If you're a first-time payer, you get another SMS for your TV license. So legalize your entertainment from the comfort of your home. Pay your TV license the easy and convenient way with MTN Momo.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
That was, sorry Lulu, that was indeed an introduction from the International Monetary Fund. Kusi khulumisa nje indzaba lenkulu, indzaba ye-inflation. Le khona the whole world is yetfukile, inelivalo ekutheni the horizon, angithi nje in the brink of the horizon, there is a looming global recession. This debates again, I've seen a lot of economic analysts, are we in the recession yet? Because now that's not big Sanjela Paven Langwane. Asithi mabom, the last 4 monetary policy statements like Kokwe, Dr. Philip Nisi, Central Bank Governor, Mjolwa Gangwane, inflation solo yanyuk. We've had the opportunity to speak of some of our local economic analysts, La Pagangwane, the likes of Mr. Tembinkosi Dube. Labasichazele ukuthi lo mdula mbahla vele kufuna usithuse kakhulu ukuthi kufuna sibe conscious sisathenga etitolo. But I think the general debate nyalo sisekutheni, are we in the recession yet? Because inflation yaqhubeka persist and interest rates continue to rise. Sikuphi kahle kahle. These clips atasiketa leso sithombe. I'm happy with the fact that I highlight that the inflation is persistent. There's a high financial stress, and it is impacting the global outlook. Projected global growth, 2.8% by 2023. And by 2024, projected global growth 3%. It's slowing down in terms of more advanced economies are slowing down sharply, while developing countries have stronger growth, which is a big concern. Yeah. Kanti-ke sayibuka yona indzaba yakhona kuyavela nalo ukuthi economies in the Middle East and North Africa grew faster than expected eminyakeni wa-2022, but so did inflation. Kulo mnyaka nje growth will slow, but inflation will remain high. Lokho-ke kushiwo ngiyo International Monetary Funds lo qhamuka khona Jihad Azuri lo explain nakho.
Economic growth in MENA surprised on the upside in 2022, despite a series of global shocks. Real GDP growth has been revised up to 5.3%, reflecting strong domestic demand and a rebound in oil production. Yet inflation surged last year to close to 15%, leading central banks across the region to tighten monetary policy. Moving to the outlook for this year, growth will decelerate and inflation will remain persistent. Growth will slow to 3.1% in 2023, reflecting tight policies to restore macroeconomic stability, agreed OPEC plus oil production cuts, and the fallout from the recent deterioration in financial conditions. Risks to the outlook are large and tilted to the downside. We see 3 main risks. First, financial sector instability in advanced economy could rise, leading to contagion and more adverse credit conditions. Second, tighter for longer global financial conditions could prompt investors to reassess debt sustainability and push the most vulnerable economies to the brink of debt distress. Third, an escalation of the war in Ukraine could lead to high volatility in commodity markets, fueling additional inflationary pressure and amplifying the risks of social unrest. In this testing environment, policy trade-offs remain complex, and striking the right policy balance will be critical. Policymakers should stay the course to safeguard economic stability through tight monetary and fiscal policies while being mindful of financial stability risks. These challenges highlight the importance of pressing ahead with transformative reforms to encourage private sector, which is critical to bolster growth and enhance resilience, particularly in an environment where economic policies need to remain tight.
Alright, so let's siyaqhubeka nje nama-clips asoka khona enhlanganweni International Monetary Fund and the IMF's Director of the Middle East and Central Asia Departments, Jihad Azor, explains our latest projections and outlook for the Caucasus and Central Asia region.
More than a year into Russia's war in Ukraine, the conflict remains a major source of uncertainty for the Caucasus and Central Asia. On the heels of a strong recovery from the pandemic, growth in the CCA in 2022 was supported by a milder than expected contraction of the Russian economy and high oil prices in oil exporting countries, and increased transit trade and large inflows of income, capital and migrants from Russia in oil importing countries. However, as the impact of some of these spillovers fades, We expect GDP growth to slow from 4.8% in 2022 to 4.2% in 2023. Inflation is projected to fall, provided monetary policy is adequately tight and global commodity prices ease, but to remain generally in the double digits this year. The war's short-term spillovers carry risks going forward. A reversal of inflows, worse than projected growth in Russia, lower oil prices, supply chain disruptions, or lower remittances could imply a negative shock to CCA economies down the road. On the upside, inflows that have supported growth could prove resilient, and changing regional trade patterns, including renewed efforts to diversify trade routes, may present opportunities. Policymakers will need to calibrate the policy mix to reduce inflation without causing a significant slowdown and continue building fiscal buffers, while ensuring that any additional fiscal support reaches the most vulnerable. We recommend that CCA countries actively foster private sector development by reducing the state footprint in the economy and strengthening the business climate, reduce trade restrictions while pursuing diversification of trade partners and routes, decarbonize while ensuring energy security, and address governance challenges to ensure a better and more inclusive future for all.
Konke umqondisi wayo i-International Monetary Fund's European Department Alfred Khama uchaza kabanzi ekutheni esifundeni sabo balwa njani nayo inflation nokuthi ke ngumaphi ama-challenges labahlangabetana nawo lakhona nalabo abuka ukuthi atawuba khona ukuthi madodana.
Europe is facing a difficult task: bring down inflation, sustain economic growth, and maintain financial stability. All of this while countries still grapple with the fallout from the energy crisis caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Economic growth has slowed sharply. However, most countries have so far managed to escape a recession. This was thanks to falling energy prices, relief measures from governments, and easing supply chain bottlenecks. Unfortunately, inflation remains in double digits in most European emerging market economies and in some European advanced economies. Energy prices are falling, but for many other components of household expenses, prices are still increasing at a fast pace. This high inflation has led to the fastest increase in monetary policy rate in decades. And as interest rates rose, so did tensions in some corners of financial markets. As a consequence, we have seen some global banking turbulence, which also affected European banks. High inflation and tight financial conditions will slow down growth. We forecast growth in Europe will fall from 3.6% in 2022 to 0.7% this year in advanced economies, and from 4.4 to 1.1% in emerging economies. Here, we are excluding Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and Turkey. Economic growth should slowly pick up in 2024 to reach 1.4% in advanced economies and 3% in emerging economies. However, it will take a while for inflation to come down because the impact of tighter monetary policies will be felt only gradually. We project average inflation in 2024 at 3% in advanced European economies and 5.5% in emerging European economies. This is still above central bank targets. There are risks, of course. Failure to contain financial turbulence could lead to crisis and lower growth. High inflation could persist for even longer if energy prices spiked again or wage growth picked up more than expected. So, what are policymakers to do? Bringing down inflation, sustaining economic growth, and maintaining financial stability requires monetary, fiscal, and structural policies to work together. First, monetary policy will need to remain tight for an extended period. Failure to bring inflation to targets would require more contractionary monetary policies later, making a more severe economic downturn likely. Second, maintaining financial stability will require close monitoring, strong supervision, contingency planning, and prompt action where needed to strengthen capital and liquidity buffers. We also need to complete the European Banking Union. Third, more ambitious fiscal consolidation would help central banks meet their objectives at lower interest rates. This would support financial sector stability and help governments build buffers for future shocks. And finally, Structural reforms should prioritize supporting growth and reducing inflation. We need to help people join or stay in the labor market, and we need investments to lift Europe's productive capacity and speed up the green transition. This is an ambitious set of policy actions, but implemented together, it will make the European economy stronger and safer.
Nsikhathi sacibeka nje nokubuka emerging economic outlook tifundza temhlaba letihlukahlukene losanza kukhuluma nje nguye director wa IMF esifundza sase Europe. Kulesikhathi ke sitawubuka this next segment noma ke clip lelandzelako ikhuluma nge recession ukuthi what is a recession and what are the causes and impacts of a recession.
How does one determine whether a country is in a recession? What are the potential causes of recession? And what are the impacts of recessions? So what is a recession? Well, every economy goes through ups and downs. This cycle of rising and expanding and falling and contracting is called a business cycle. When these downturns are particularly long and severe, they can impact economic stability and people's well-being. And we call these recessions. Part of the reasons that recessions are tricky to define is because there is no single definition of what a recession is. Countries around the world adopt different definitions. However, some economists use a very simple definition, where a recession is a decline in gross domestic product for at least 2 consecutive quarters or 6 months. Now recall, gross domestic product, or GDP, is a measure of the size of an economy. It's the total value of all goods and services produced by an economy. Now, while this simple definition allows for international comparisons, it's not perfect. And the reason that we have a little bit of pause is, one, GDP is just one single measure of the health of an economy. And number two, it can be subject to large revisions. And that's why countries around the world use a multitude of different indicators. This includes personal income, unemployment, consumption. Broadly speaking, what we expect to see during recessions is falling incomes, rising unemployment, decreased factory production, and increased bankruptcies. That brings us to our second question. What are potential causes of recession? Now, part of what makes predicting recessions a little bit tricky is there can be several different drivers behind any given recession. That includes domestic factors coming from within one's own country, as well as external factors from sources outside of one's country. Let me give you a couple examples. On the external side, you can have supply shortages or slowdowns in the delivery of important goods, like gas or semiconductors that go into computers and cars. When this happens, economies are not able to produce or consume as much as they used to before. Now, on the domestic side, you can have large and prolonged increases in risky borrowing and investments. So this might mean that, for example, households are taking out mortgages that they're struggling to pay off. In some cases, you might see many households, firms, and sometimes even governments unable to pay off their debts. This often trickles over to financial markets, and then you see increasing concern from lenders not wanting to give out new loans. Now we have a domino effect, spilling over to wealth, investment, employment, and consumption. Now, those were just 2 examples of what could cause a recession. There are many, many more, but we don't have time for all of them today. So let's tackle your third question. What are the potential impacts of recessions? Let's start off with businesses. So during downturns, businesses often see falling sales, falling profits, and this leads them to delay or even reduce investment in hiring. What does that mean for workers? That means fewer jobs in the market and probably lower wages. Now, even when somebody can find a job, sometimes it could be part-time, a bad fit, or lower paying. And we call that underemployment. Now, the effect of recessions extends beyond workers. They can impact entire families. There's less money around to spend on food, on education, on healthcare, impacting the entire family. Now, finally, it's important to note that the impact of recessions really differs across the population, with the poorest and most vulnerable often being the hardest hit. So what can governments do? Well, the good thing is that they can do a lot to build resiliency and reduce the severity and length of recessions. For instance, they can adopt policies to reduce risky borrowing and investments. They can also introduce targeted social protection programs to buffer vulnerable populations during those downturns.
Kanzi-ke sesivile nje indaba yokuthi yini i-recession. The next question would be, what are the interest rates and how do they impact the economy? This next segment answers all the questions that concern this question.
So over the past year, we've seen inflation pick up all over the world. And in response, many central banks have tried bringing inflation back down using a powerful tool called interest rates. Today, we're going to tackle questions around the theme of interest rates. So what are they? How do they impact the economy? And how do rising interest rates affect inflation? So, what are interest rates? Well, interest rates refer to the cost of borrowing money. And they show up everywhere. So whether I'm taking out a student loan or using my credit card for major purchases or applying for a mortgage loan to buy a house. And while there's many different types of interest rates, the most important tool to move interest rates is the interest rate set by a country's central bank. Economists call this the policy rate. And as its name suggests, you can think of a central bank as being the big bank of normal banks. A central bank's policy rate determines how much it costs banks to borrow money, which in turn determines what banks charge everyone else to borrow from them. So that brings us to our second question. How does the central bank's interest rate impact the economy? When policy rates are low, the cost of borrowing money is cheap for banks. So they charge households and companies and governments lower interest rates. Now this is going to have ripple effects throughout the entire economy. Lower interest rates mean a lower cost for borrowing loans or lower payments on existing loans like variable rate mortgages. This drives up spending, it drives up investment, it drives up demand, and as a result, you get an increase in overall economic activity. Now, sometimes the balance between the supply and demand of goods and services in an economy can go off track, like we've seen over the last year. Supply shortages of everything ranging from cars to semiconductors to delivery workers clashed with really high demand. And that meant there was too much demand chasing too little supply. And that drove up prices. Now, central banks can't do very much about there being too little supply in the short term, but by changing the policy rate, they can have a major impact on demand. So that brings us to our third question. How do rising interest rates affect inflation? The higher cost of borrowing lowers demand by discouraging people from taking out loans or spending on their credit cards. On the flip side, interest rates for saving accounts also increase, and so that makes saving more attractive. For businesses, lower consumer spending often means less profits, and they too are facing higher borrowing costs. So as a result, you might see them push off investment or have to cut production, and that can lead to higher unemployment. Higher interest rates can also affect government spending plans too, as their financing costs rise. And so altogether, all these different pieces lead to lower demand and they help reduce inflation. Now you might be wondering, if increasing interest rates to tackle inflation causes all of this economic pain, why would we do it? So in the face of rising inflation, higher interest rates are often a necessary pain. Inflation is the worst tax on the poor. And if it isn't dealt with quickly, it can lead to even higher costs of living that further increase hardship, hurt consumer confidence, and over time, decrease trust in policymakers' ability to bring inflation back down to manageable levels. Now, if policymakers do lose the trust of the public, households and businesses can start to assume that maybe prices will continue increasing at an elevated pace. And workers will demand higher wages to keep pace with that inflation. In turn, those higher wages can lead to more demand pressure and a further spiraling up of prices. The trick here is for central banks to find the Goldilocks level of interest rates, in between too low and too high, that brings inflation back under control without putting too much strain on an economy.
Right, besicotha nje kundlalela ama-clips lasuka kwenhlangano International Monetary Fund kusiniketa nje a regional economic outlook ukuthi ikakhulukazi nje these clips were educating us on inflation, recession nema-bank interest rates. I think laba kuvedile nje ukhulumile lapha director wa IMF esifundeni sase-Europe ngokuthi impilo echubekayo even nase-Ukraine nase-Russia ilimatile ema-economies emave lase-Europe ngaloko ukuthi kukhangela ukuthi setinenkinga letinyukako energy prices went up and they're still increasing kanjalo ke nokudla nako solo kuyabita ititolo kuningi nje lokunyukile nasemabhange banks were also affected by the inflation echubeka kweveni lase-Ukraine nase-Russia because interest rates nawo abonakele anyuka kakhulu bebasiniketa nje sithombe ukuthi ngabe inflation ingasilimata kanganani what is recession, what are the causes and impacts of a recession khona lapha emhlabeni.
Yeah, kanti-ke lolu yindzaba lenkulu vele njengoba sibona ukuthi Central Bank yala kaNgwane sibonile ibamba imihlangano ne-Ministry of Finance bakhulumisa dona tindzaba ukuthi balungise ama-legislations latakhona kuhlangabetana naso lesimo lesi njengoba the world has officially declared vele ukuthi there's a looming global recession lekhona sengabi kuyo officially but the effects sekavele akhona lungelele ngicabanga ukuthi njengoba veta Themkos the analyst kuthi nawe na uthenga breakfast ekseni so yabona manje ukuthi akusiyo le mali ngihlale ngiyispenda lena so lokubuka nje letindzaba leto sekuthi le recession ikhona the simultaneous rate hikes la continue to rise confirmed by a study, by the way, that was confirmed by the World Bank. Le highlight there is an urgent need for one policies that are okay by inflation. Kanzigena level kangwane will not be spared from lauma effects lao. So kuyajabulisa nje bona ukuthi ikhona imitamo lesiyendako so wabona every month monthly monetary policy statements as update ekutheni sesime kuphi but lokumcwa kakhulu ukuthi umuntu vele ukuthi abuke ukuthi imali yakhe uyispenda kanjani nyalo. Don't spend your money unnecessarily. Only buy something that you genuinely need. Kuthenga isweet nje lungelele salokuba invoya itolo siyabagcolisela kakhulu abasithengisela emasweet kodwa nje kuthi sengidalithengela abunandi out sibahlola emarket nasibuya sithola i-traffic update.
Do you remember the spinning thing? This is us. This picture represents what we did. We were there when coronavirus wreaked havoc in our population. Together with other stakeholders, we formed the first line, controlling the spread of the unknown and unseen enemy of the people. Anxious ourselves, we collected dead bodies countrywide. At the time when no one wanted to come near dead bodies of loved ones, we did care for our fellow citizens. Thank you, the people of Eswatini and teams of first responders.
Asimenze sinimukele ngo5 minutes before 7 sidabuka samgwaqo namhla ekseni asivusele Sergeant Gole ngabe kuhambe kanjani emgwaqweni namhla ekseni.
Anguvusele Thombeni ngivusele alokukhethekile umbukelo welihlelo sivuka namuhla simo selitulu etindzaweni etiphakeme ikhona inkungu noko akusiyo leqinile kepha nje singakhuthatha nje kakhulu kubashayeli ukuthi asichubeke bekunene silinciphise litubane ikakhulukazi lapho ikhona lenkungu nekukhanyisa nemalambu nekwengeta ke umgamo wokulandzela leyona ke imotolo yebo likelana kepha ke kuletinye indzawo kubonakala umgwaqo wethu sowomile lokunakeka konje ke lesingakuveta akhona emanti lemile kuleto kucojana lesithi nje nakhona abashayela bachubeke bashayele ngalokukhulu ukucophelela kanti ke tibane lesemgwaqo tibane letingasebenzi ngito tibane letilapha eMangwaneni letisolo tingasebenzi njalo lesithi nje awube kunene asichubekeni nakhona silinciphise litubane kwadise ukuthi takheleneke nato ke leyo ndzawo lenebafundi lesithi nje nakhona sibacaphele kakhulu njengoba kubhekekile ukuthi bewele umgwaqo ngalokuphephile kanti ke nasisuka lapha ekeni laseNgwenya uhamba ngemgwaqo wethu lomkhulu lobheka khona lapha endasi kumatsapho lapha eVuchini na usanza nje kwenganalo loho kuneloli lapho lemile lapho ithethe-ke ingxenye yemizila yokuhamba lesisike nabashayeli basasonzela lapho abayicaphele kwatise ukuthi iyawunciphisa umgwaco ikakhulukazi nakuyawuhamba tona timotolo letinkhulu kanti lapha etulu esipiki nakhona solo ikhona iloli lelapha la usuka eplantation ungakefiki nangeyamgwaco lobheka khona lapha kumaguga lesithi nakhona abashayeli abacaphele njengoba timotolo tingaphambani kuleyo ngcingwana leyo kepha tiniketa nawona-ke mathuba tibekiwe-ke timpawu kuleyo ndzawana leyo kusedolobheni lelikhulu mhlambe lelapha endasi kamanzini lesingakucaphelisa khona ukuthi imigwaqo yethu solo iyalungiswa etindzaweni letiningi ilungiswa nje-ke lapho seyungathi seyibuyiselwe khona kuseteke leyo midwebo yaphansi siyagcizelela nje kakhulu nakhona ukuthi abashayeli abachubeke banake kakhulu ikakhulukazi lapha e-Central indzawo lebonakalako iphithithela kakhulu kwatise ukuthi yakhelene nato tikolo siyakhuthata nje kakhulu ukuthi bekunene asibanake bantfana nekuhlonipha-ke tona tibane temgwaco sekubonakele ukuthi awu labanye abashayeli bathatha ematfomo kanti ngekwenta njalo ufaka engotini naba labahamba ngetinyawo yena siqiniseko nje sekuthi uyema uyatiniketa lithuba lenele lokuniketa nalabo labahamba ngetinyawo ukuthi bewele-ke ngalokuphephile kanti lapha endasi nawubheka khona eshiselweni siyawukhumbula ukuthi umgwaco wethu uyalungiswa ikakhulukazi nawusuka lapha kaMjuda ubheka khona lapha ubukhasini uhamba ngemgwaco long-MR11 niketiwe-ke indledlana lesingayisebenzisa kwesikhashana tibekiwe timpawu letingitona tiyasilawula ukuthi njengoba umgwaco ulungiswa siyawubhekeka ukuthi sisebenzise nathi tindledlana nathi nakhona-ke litubane asente isiqiniseko sokuthi kuyaba litubane leliphansi lesiyawuhamba ngalo kuleyo ndzawo kwatise kokuthi akusiwo umgwaco lowakhelwe ukuthi timotolo tingahamba nje ngalokukhulu ukukhululeka kanti-ke kuletinye tifundza lesingakuveta nawuqhamuka lapha e-Big Bend ubuya khona etulu lapha kuhelehele kunetindzawana lapho kuvusetelwa yona-ke imidwebo yaphansi lesithi nakhona sicaphele sisasonzela kuleyo ngcingwana leyo umthamo-ke timotolo usetule emigwaqweni lelinana labo lapha hamba ngetinyawo asene-ke isiqiniseko sokuthi la ukhona khona uyabona futhi uyabonakala futhi wena siqiniseko sokuthi-ke uyamnikeza lomunye lithuba lokusebenzisa umgwaqo ngendlela leyo abangilephephile kungaba ngiloko nje kuseni sizinja kube indlela lenhle kuwonke losebenzisa umgwaqo nanendlini emsakato sinifisele lona lilanga lelihle yabona leliphephile nisaqhubeka nemsebenzi wenu.
Asibakhulu Sergeant Gole kusiniketala yombiko sibahlolela imakethe esibhene dinzabada ngephandle.
Asia's least developed countries. Roughly 1,000 people had to be evacuated after seawaters rose more than 3 meters. But the cyclone's true impact is still unclear. In neighbouring Bangladesh, authorities had already evacuated hundreds of thousands of people from the cyclone's path, a move that may have saved lives.
Our fire department is ready to deal with the aftermath left by the cyclone and handle the disaster relief work. We came in the early morning to evacuate villagers going door to door. They've all been sent to nearby safe places for shelter.
Mocha spared the Bangladeshi city of Cox's Bazar, which had been in the storm's predicted path. More than 1 million Rohingya Muslims live in refugee camps in the city, having fled persecution in Myanmar.
President Volodymyr Zelensky is set to travel to Britain on Monday for his latest stop on a European tour that has also seen him meet leaders in Italy, Germany and France. Zelensky visited Paris on Sunday for a 3-hour meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron, resulting in a pledge from France for additional military aid for Ukraine, including light tanks, armored vehicles and training for soldiers.
Touching down at dusk in Paris, the key moment of Ukraine's war approaching, its leader is shoring up support, met on the runway by the French Prime Minister, then greeted with fanfare at the Élysée Palace. A second visit here and a similar narrative. After the handshakes and the smiles, the questions for President Macron over the 3-hour dinner. What more can France provide before Ukraine launches its counter-offensive against Russia? President Zelensky, in optimistic mood as he arrived, tweeting this.
Paris, with each visit, Ukraine's defence and offensive capabilities are expanding. The ties with Europe are getting stronger, and the pressure on Russia is growing.
In a brief joint statement after the meeting, it was confirmed France will now send dozens of light tanks and French troops will be involved in the training of Ukrainian soldiers. But it was Germany where President Zelensky had the biggest support. He travelled there earlier to collect the prestigious Charlemagne Prize for European values and also received a €2.7 billion military aid package, including state-of-the-art Leopard tanks, as well as air defence systems. The long weekend of shuttle diplomacy began in Italy with an audience with the Pope and a warm welcome from Italy's right-wing leader, whose coalition partners have previously praised Russia. And in the past few hours, the UK too has answered calls for desperately needed air defence missiles and drones. They're sending hundreds, indications that point to last-minute preparations in Ukraine's fight to recapture lost territory.
Thousands protested in the Senegalese capital, Dakar, on Friday against President Macky Sall's refusal to rule out a controversial third term. The demonstration was called by the Movement of the Leaving Forces of Senegal F24, a new umbrella organization comprising more than 170 political and rights groups.
The protesters gathered here in central Dakar have one principal aim: to stop Macky Sall running for a third presidential term. Among them are supporters of the Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko.
We are going to fight Macky Sall right until the end. We are going to fight him. He must keep his hands off Sonko.
In 2011, all the Senegalese people gathered here to defend the principles of liberty and democracy. Macky Sall, who's now president, was among us.
This new protest movement, known as F24, is composed of more than 150 political and civil society organizations. They believe Macky Sall's government is too authoritarian.
As well as fighting against the third term, we also want to reinstate elements of the electoral code that were changed by Macky Sall to sideline political opponents. We want these elements reinstated.
Macky Sall hasn't yet officially declared his candidacy for the 2024 election.
We cannot accept that the Senegalese people of any rank can decide who can or cannot be a candidate. It is the role of the Constitutional Council to validate candidacies in accordance with the law.
F24 have already announced another protest for next week.
A record turnout in Thailand's election has seen voters reject the country's military-backed politicians that have dominated Thai politics for years. The Move Forward party, led by Peter, is in the lead, and the 42-year-old, who has built up strong support among young voters, says he is ready for the country's top job.
A new progressive force in the landscape of Thai politics. Peter Limjaronrat has led his party to victory in the lower house of parliament. Now he says he's ready for the top job.
People of Thailand have already spoken their wish, and I am ready to be the Prime Minister for all, whether you agree with me or you disagree with me.
The 42-year-old has built a large support base among young Thais, often from urban areas, who are fed up with pro-military conservative leadership. He's already vowed to push ahead with a move to change the country's controversial royal defamation law, which can put people in jail for up to 15 years for anything deemed as an insult to Thailand's royal family. His other promises include promoting small businesses, curbing monopolies, and ending military conscription.
Move Forward has welfare policies, but Move Forward moves to the new frontier. It's no longer about populism. So actually, they have tapped into a lot of sentiments that have been feeling, I think, that Thailand needs to change. And that change has to do with the reform of the military, the monarchy, getting rid of the draft.
Lim Jaronrat spent time in New Zealand as a teenager before studying in Bangkok and then at Harvard in the US. He's also a businessman and was only 25 when his father died, forcing him to return to Thailand to take over the family's struggling agriculture company. One of the younger candidates of Thailand's election, Lim Jaronrat is also popular on social media, often posting photos with his 7-year-old daughter. But in a country where military coups and court orders have often trumped the ballot box, his success in the election doesn't necessarily mean the road to Prime Minister will be a smooth one. He needs to gather enough votes in Parliament to make up for military-appointed Senate members. Support from the runner-up Pheu Thai party is a strong start.
Thai voters have delivered a clear rejection of nearly a decade of military-aligned rule. Election results showed on Monday backing two pro-democracy opposition parties.
It's a resounding no to military rule in Thailand. Forecasts put the Moving Forward party in first place, the political iteration of the movement behind the 2022 street protests, calling to rein in the power of the monarchy. Closely followed by Pheu Thai, the descendant of billionaire Thaksin Shinawat's party, led this time by his daughter. Both wish to challenge the military royalist status quo and are favourable to a coalition.
It's definitely on the card. Before and after election results, I think we have proved time and time again that if we form it together, we'll be able to answer all the challenges that the country is facing.
If Khao Kai come first, then they have the right to initiate the coalition.
Move Forward is considered the younger, more radical movement, wishing to push for institutional change. And unlike Pheu Thai, pledged never to enter into coalition with their military-aligned opponent parties. Pheu Thai has a more populist manifesto, leading heavily on social policies. The result is a blow for the ruling military junta, but the electoral system was created by the military for the military. The 250-seat Senate is entirely military-appointed. So, to form a government without its support, the coalition will need a 75% majority in the National Assembly. So a majority without military coalition partners may still be a tall order in Thailand.
With Turkey's election looking set for a second round, France 24 takes a look at the two men vying for the country's top job, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has led Turkey for the past 20 years, and challenger Kemal.
Two men battling it out for one place as Turkish head of state. Recep Tayyip Erdogan has dominated politics in the country for more than 2 decades. Born into a poor conservative Muslim family, Erdogan has humble beginnings. It was in 1994 that he began his rise to prominence when he became mayor of Istanbul. 9 years later, Erdogan would go on to be prime minister. His premiership, centered on neoliberal policies, triggered huge growth in the country. In 2014, an amendment to the constitution meant that Erdogan would become the first president in Turkey to be elected by direct universal suffrage. In July of 2016, the leader survived a military coup attempt. In the aftermath, Ankara declared a state of emergency that lasted 2 years and began a massive crackdown. The following year, Erdogan reformed the constitution to govern by decree.
The April 16th referendum will be the best answer for our enemies.
Erdogan's popularity has started to wane. The Turkish president has been under fire for his handling of the February 6th earthquakes that killed nearly 50,000 people. The Turkish economy has faced a succession of crises, a fact Erdogan's rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, never lets the incumbents forget. Onions have become somewhat of a symbol in Kılıçdaroğlu's campaign. Food prices in Turkey have tripled in 1 year. The 74-year-old economist has vowed to increase Turks' purchasing power. He's promised a more independent judiciary as well as greater gender equality. He's never stopped denouncing corruption cases made against the president. A longtime leader of the Republican People's Party, Kılıçdaroğlu now unites the opposition. Last March, she was chosen to chair the Table of Six, a coalition which includes a diverse group of political factions ranging from the moderate left to the nationalist far right. On social media, Kılıçdaroğlu broke a political taboo by claiming he belonged to the Alevi minority, a group who have been discriminated against by the more conservative Sunnis.
In Turkey, votes are still being counted for elections that have been described as one of the most consequential in the country's history. So far, results show that the incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has a comfortable lead on his opponent Kemal, but neither side has managed to secure 50% of the votes to avoid a runoff.
It wasn't quite the election night Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had hoped for. But as he greeted a sea of supporters gathered at his AK party headquarters, the incumbent remained optimistic, despite the race likely heading for a runoff vote.
If our nation has made its choice in favor of a second round, then that is also welcome. We strongly believe that we will continue to serve our nation for the next 5 years.
Votes are still being tallied and the incumbent has a comfortable lead, but he's so far failed to hit the 50% threshold needed to win outright. These elections are the biggest challenge to Erdogan's 20-year-long rule in Turkey, and his opponent Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu is hoping to keep up the pressure. The leader of a six-party alliance says he's ready to face a runoff, but cried foul over vote counting.
From the ballot boxes where our votes are high, they are blocking the system with repeated objections. What you are blocking is Turkey's will.
Also vying for the presidency is Sinan Oğan. The candidate, who is backed by the nationalist ATA Alliance Party, is trailing far behind his rivals. Who he decides to endorse in the possible next round could be critical.
Dear friends, there will be another difficult 15 days ahead of us. At this time, we are not saying whether we'll support one party or the other.
In the parliamentary vote, Erdogan's coalition is heading for a majority. It's on course to secure 324 seats out of the 600 seats in parliament. If confirmed, a runoff will take place on May 28th.
Pakistan's ruling coalition is rallying against the country's Chief Justice. Thousands gathered outside the Supreme Court demanding the Chief Justice resign for releasing former Prime Minister Imran Khan.
Pakistan's capital Islamabad once again the scene of protest. On Monday, the ruling alliance staged a rare, massive demonstration against the Supreme Court's decision to declare last week's arrest of former Prime Minister Imran Khan unlawful. Accusing the Supreme Court of double standards, coalition partners demanded the Chief Justice resign.
We hope to achieve rule of law in this country because decisions of the Supreme Court seem to be biased towards a political party and against a political party. And it has never happened that an accused on physical remand has been granted release by an apex court.
On May 9, paramilitary forces arrested Khan at the Islamabad High Court complex on corruption charges. His arrest led to 3 days of violent and deadly protests. After the nation's top court declared Khan's arrest illegal, the federal court granted him 2 weeks bail and prohibited his arrest until Wednesday.
What does Imran Khan do? He incites the people. He incites his workers and the judiciary. He tries to exert pressure on the judiciary. So we want our voices to be heard as well.
Maulana Fazlur Rahman, leader of a religious political party, called on coalition partners to gather in front of the Supreme Court on Monday.
The government tried to dissuade the organizers of the rally from holding their protest in front of the Supreme Court because of security concerns. But Maulana Fazlur Rahman, the man who is leading the 13-party ruling coalition, refused.
As negotiations to move the protest venue failed, Rahman's supporters broke through the gates to the high-security red zone. Along with police and paramilitary forces, a huge contingent of volunteer guards allied with Rahman's party maintained order at the site where thousands of people from across Pakistan had gathered.
Our responsibility is to not let anyone come close to important buildings and to protect them like we protect our own homes.
A member of Khan's party and its legal team called the protest improper and irrelevant.
Yes, you can hold a judgment, the reasoning of the judgment in, you can criticize it, you can hold rallies against it, but you can't hold rallies against a court or the judges for giving a judgment.
The pro-government march happened despite a prohibition on gatherings of more than 5 people. The legal advisor for Khan's party called it a selective application of the law, saying his party was not allowed to hold mass gatherings. Hundreds of Khan supporters were detained in violent protests last week.
Tunisians on the island of Jerba are in mourning after the attack at a synagogue that killed 5 people. Jewish and Muslim members of the community have come together to offer support and to send out a message of reassurance as the peak tourist season approaches, with some 30,000 of Jerba's 160,000 residents depending on the sector.
In the city of Souk in Jerba, most jewelers are Jewish Tunisians. Ariel is still in mourning over the attack, but has gone back to work. He talks with Hatem, a Muslim shopkeeper. Both depend on selling to tourists and returning diaspora.
I own the shop. It's been about 30 years, and it's been relatively successful. But with this attack, we hope that it won't dissuade tourists, because what happened is really shocking.
I live just next to the Hara neighborhood, where Ariel and Jewish Tunisians live. I live just 500 meters away, and we always lived here without any problems. The attack is a strike against tourism, because Jerba essentially lives off of it.
Since 2022, tourism in Jerba had begun to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, with the number of visitors more than doubling. Most of these are Tunisians and French. This year, with the continuing economic crisis, the return of tourism is seen as a lifeline. But for how long?
So yes, this news does impact us. We were slightly concerned, but very quickly we were reassured. In any case, we booked for 15 days. So we'll return to Jerba in August.
Hotels are also trying to reassure people, still offering their tourism packages.
It is important to maintain activity no matter what. We still employ a few thousand people on the island of Jerba. There are many people who come to work on the island, and the economic activities depend on it.
Today, it's still early to assess the impact of the attack on the tourism season. But on the island, security forces who did not want to be filmed remained on high alert.
As fears of a possible Chinese invasion mount, Taiwan is conducting annual military drills that include training to respond to a simulated attack by Beijing. It is one of a number of ways the island is preparing for potential hostilities.
Taiwanese Air Force for Chinese military aircraft southwest of Taiwan, who have entered our southwestern air defense identification zone and are jeopardizing aviation safety. Turn around and leave immediately.
Robin Su is a former radio operator for the Navy. He has just picked up a signal with one of his homemade antennas. A Chinese aircraft has crossed the Taiwan Strait median line, an unofficial maritime border that is supposed to separate the self-ruled island from mainland China. Robin has counted more than 600 incursions like this in the past 4 months.
We as citizens have the right to know why the Chinese military is constantly harassing us. We can't trust those who talk about peace in the Straits of Taiwan.
In recent months, Beijing has stepped up military pressure, its aircrafts inching ever closer to the Taiwanese coast. For example, with this particular flight path back in April.
The Chinese BZK-005 drone encircled Taiwan for the first time.
New devices mean new threats that Taiwanese soldiers will be training to counter during this year's military drills.
The Army has organized a computer simulation of a Chinese invasion and has been testing out different scenarios. This year, the focus is on the East Coast, because a People's Liberation Army aircraft carrier was training there last month.
Taipei is trying to strengthen its army by extending the military service and training female reservists.
I think the country's problems concern us all, so I thought I must come.
Small country compared to China. This is a David and Goliath situation. That's why it's important to keep a strong military reserve and maintain a certain level of combat readiness amongst our reservists.
Taiwan's annual defense budget increased by 14% in 2023, growing twice as fast as that of Beijing. Phase 2 of this year's War Games is set for July, when the Army, Navy and Air Force will practice a coordinated response to a hypothetical attack from China.
The world's biggest chocolate producers are enjoying record profits but are failing to pass on the benefits to cocoa farmers, many of whom are suffering falling incomes and worsening poverty, according to a report from the charity Oxfam.
Ghana is the world's second largest producer of cocoa. Farmers' incomes in the country fell 16% on average since the start of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, according to Oxfam's analysis.
COVID, of course, was a big disruption, but then also the war in Ukraine and the resulting economic crisis, coupled with some more longer-term challenges, like the impact of climate change and aging farms, which is a big issue in Ghana.
Oxfam says many Ghanaian cocoa farmers survive on just $2 a day.
Lower incomes really have shown to facilitate the use of children on farms, so child labor, which is a big problem, of course, in Ghana and other cocoa-producing countries, but also deforestation, that farmers are more likely to go out and cut down more trees in order to expand their farms, in order to make a living.
At the same time, Oxfam says profits for the world's biggest chocolate firms, Hershey, Lindt & Sprüngli, Mondelez and Nestle, have increased by 16% since the pandemic.
And that translates into 15 billion of profit by just the 4 largest public chocolate companies since 2020.
Ivory Coast is the world's biggest producer of cocoa. Here too, farmers complain of falling incomes.
We planters are poor. The Westerners who come to buy cocoa are getting rich. Meanwhile, we are suffering. We earn nothing. We suffer cultivating the fields. That's why we ask the government to help us.
The governments of Ghana and Ivory Coast signed a deal in 2021 to try to get a bigger share of the chocolate industry's profits by setting a minimum price and obtaining a cash premium per ton of cocoa, which is an extra sum paid directly to farmers on top of the commercial price of cocoa. But Oxfam says the payments have failed to meaningfully increase farmers' incomes.
If you as a company are profitable at the same time as the producers of your most critical raw material are falling deeper into poverty, then there's something wrong with your business model.
Lindt and Sprüngli told VOA they pay Ghanaian farmers a $60 per ton premium and invested over $20 million in cocoa sustainability programs in 2021. Hershey said it aims to support better livelihoods for farmers with cash transfers and loans. Mondelez and Nestle did not respond to VOA requests for comment.
As the world waits for Ukraine to begin its anticipated counter-offensive against Russia, the number 2 official at NATO is cautioning China not to provide military support to Moscow as Russia continues its brutal and illegal invasion.
On Monday, Britain provided another aid package for Ukraine, this time with air defense missiles and long-range drones, just 2 days after Germany announced its biggest military aid package for Ukraine since the start of the invasion. But as allies help bolster Ukraine ahead of an anticipated counteroffensive, NATO's Deputy Secretary General is cautioning China not to do the same for Russia, which he says the world sees as the clear aggressor in the Ukraine war.
We have not seen yet signs of China delivering military equipments to helping Russia, but we know that discussions are going on. This will be a very, very serious decision by China that will be affecting not only their relationship with us, but the reputation of China in the rest of the world.
After a static winter, officials say Ukraine is now conducting shaping operations ahead of the planned assault.
We also see a fluid situation along the front line. We're also having indications of some territorial progress from the Ukrainian side in the western side of Bakhmut. But I think, and we know that Ukraine has the capacity to launch a successive counteroffensive, but we also know that Russia has the capacity to put forward a significant resistance.
Military experts believe the war in Ukraine will increasingly pit quantity against quality in the coming months.
The Russians will have to focus on quantity, larger number of conscripts and mobilized people, not well trained, older material, but large numbers. The Ukrainians focus on quality with Western weapon systems and Western training. That's the big difference.
But NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe says that while Ukraine has severely degraded Russian ground forces, Moscow's air, sea, and cyber forces remain largely intact.
In other domains, the degradation has been much less noticeable.
NATO's Deputy Secretary General told VOA the alliance remains committed to Ukraine.
The number one thing is to help Ukraine win this war.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv aims to retake all Ukrainian territory, while vowing not to attack Russian land.
29 minutes after 7, sibhesela bhoda ngaphandle kwakuleli. Let's take a break. Nasibuya sidabe sikhuluma na Senate President Lindiwe Dlamini.
Pay your TV license quickly and easily with MTN Momo. Simply dial *007 *3 hash and select option 8 for TV license. Enter your national ID number as your reference and the amount you wish to pay. Then enter your PIN to confirm your payment. Once your payment has been made, you'll receive a confirmation SMS of your payment. If you're a first-time payer, you get another SMS for your TV license. So legalize your entertainment from the comfort of your home. Pay your TV license the easy and convenient way with MTN Momo.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
Two minutes after 7, welcome back and thank you for staying with us. The official opening of the 10th retreat of the Association of Senates, Shura and equivalent councils of Africa in the Arab world, Lehadiwang ASEC, had commenced on a very high note at Royal Swazi Convention Center, Eswatini, from the 11th to the 13th of May and ended with an excursion on Saturday, the 14th of May. They set the country abuzz with activity following the COVID-19 pandemic, which halted many activities internationally. Now, a week prior to the historic high-level international parliamentary gathering, Senate President of the Parliament of the Kingdom of Eswatini, Pastor Lindiwe Dlamini, was a guest on the breakfast show to give us an update regarding the state of readiness and a brief of what ASECA entails. We are honored once again to have the Senate President back on the show this morning to give us highlights of what transpired during the retreat and which countries were able to attend. Dlamini, a very good morning. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. It's your second appearance on the show in less than, 2 weeks? You woke up in the wee hours of the morning, and with temperatures having dropped significantly, to me that speaks to the level of commitment and dedication you have for your job, and we thank you so much for that. Please talk to me about, the retreat from last week, from the outside looking in, just purely based on media reports that I saw. Mbonegutsi, it was a success. Was it indeed a success?
Thank you very much. Greetings to you and to our viewers at home. It was a tremendous success. I think we were even surprised to see how it actually turned out. Yes, we had prepared. We did everything we could, and then we just left everything in the hands of God to say, you know what, do the rest. What I can say is every delegate or every team that came was actually just amazed. First of all, by the country. They arrived at the airport, they marveled at our infrastructure, and then they drove through our roads. They could not believe the level of development in our country. And they got to the hotels, and the hospitality was at a very high level. Sometimes you don't realize what you have until when somebody from outside comes in and begins to marvel and celebrate what you have. I think that is what I learned the most, to say, you know what, we do need to stop as a Maswati and look at what we've done and actually pat ourselves on the shoulder to say, wow, we have worked and we have a country that is orderly. Actually, I think that was what everybody kept commenting about. It's so orderly, it's excellent, it's clean. Yes. And we didn't think that way, so I think that was major. The conference, the retreat started on a very high note. The attendance was amazing. We had 19 countries that were represented, and large numbers in all their delegations. And they were very involved, the discussions, for those that were present, were, each country wanted to make an intervention on what their country is doing. ASECA, of course, you will recall that it is an association of senates and shura councils. And obviously countries that have senates in Africa and in the Arab world. So this collaboration, bringing together of senates is really quite a powerful platform, wherein we share experiences. But what is most interesting is that as countries, we are all at different levels. Others are highly developed, others are middle, others are actually poor. But now when you have the three coming together, the sharing of information is amazing. It's everyone comes out with an experience, everyone comes up with something to implement in their own country. So I actually would want to agree with you to say, indeed, it was a tremendous success.
Yeah,
thank you.
That is beautiful to hear. I think as a fellow Swati myself, it is something that motivates me to hear that people marveled at the beauty that is Eswatini. Speaking of 19 countries, speaking at the fact that there was that cross-pollination of information between all these senates. Some of the excerpts from, the retreat speak to parliamentarians being better positioned to lead in coming up with relevant legislations to address economic challenges faced by Africa and the Arab world. And, speaking on the cross-pollination of information that you just alluded to, I think that was very important. I want you to talk to me about this development. What is the takeaway from the retreat in addressing economic challenges? Because like you said, we may marvel on what is beautiful, but we still have challenges just like every other state.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. In fact, my observation in the whole retreat was that Africa needs to grow up. Africa needs to appreciate what they have. Africa needs to look within and look at homegrown and continental grown solutions. For too long, Africa has not woken up to her own identity and has allowed other continents to prescribe and actually tell it how to conduct themselves, from political to economic. That was my observation. Yeah. And also to then say, Africa needs to trade within herself. Africa needs to trade with the Arab world. Yeah. We have a wealth of resources that we can actually harness to improve the lives of our people. That was a major take-home for me to say, you know what, if you do not know who you are, anyone will tell you who you are. Yeah. So I think that has been my observation, that for too long, I mean, we are a young person.
Yeah.
A lot of our young people do not seem to see what we have in our own countries.
Yeah.
They look outward. Meanwhile, things are not as good as they look outside. You know, every country has its own challenges.
Yeah.
But when you look at your own country and look at what you can do for your country more than what your country should do for you, you know, for me it was more to say, you know what, I think we all need to grow up from the entitlement mentality. We need to grow up from always expecting handouts and to say, you know, with the brains, with the talents, with the gifts that I have, what can I do to make my country a better country and to make the continent the great continent that it is, and to make the continent a producer and not just producing for other continents, but produce, beneficiate, and make sure we give a better quality of life for our peoples.
And I'm happy, Senate President, that you are speaking on, you're touching on young people as well as taking advantage of what we have. One of the advantages that we have, especially as Eswatini, is the demographic dividend of young people. It's quite a lot of us. And, you know, it is very beautiful to see how much government is taking seriously, especially this year, empowering young people. We saw with the youth parliament, the climate change youth parliament. Yes. It's also beautiful to see the European Union, you know, inducting the youth sounding board, something that we should really take advantage of. As you have alluded to, Africa really does need to grow up. I love quoting what you're saying because it inspires me. You know, this 10th retreat was also premised on 2 thematic areas. We've touched on the first one, which is addressing economic challenges. Yes. But the second one, which speaks to the green economy. The world right now is threatened by a major global issue, that of climate change. I am motivated and, you know, I'm very pleased with the fact that you addressed, you know, measures to mitigate the issue of our climate change. Yeah. Talk to me about the developments. What was really talked about in terms of, you know, speaking to green economy, a sustainable one at that?
Right. That was a very important topic, because what came out of that was, yes, we are talking industrialization. Yeah. Yes, we are talking development. Maybe allow me to digress a bit to say it is unfortunate indeed that other economies have industrialized, and in the process of industrialization, you know, now we are bearing the brunt of their development. Yeah. Now we are having to everyone now has to like slow down. Meanwhile, we as the African continent and the Arab world still need to be growing our economies. So I'm appreciating efforts where the first world countries are seeing the need to give back into this community because they have developed. Yeah. And it is that development that has affected, you know, the globe, as it were. Indeed. And the climate change that we're encountering right now. So, but all the same, now let's look at the solutions. Part of the solutions that were presented was clearly we need we need renewable energy, and a number of countries were presenting on strides they've made on renewable energy. Morocco, the Kingdom of Morocco, for instance, has I think the largest solar plants, you know, in the world. I think, if not in the continent, but I think they have the largest. Yeah. So obviously they're making a very positive strides. Even the Kingdom of Lesotho, interesting enough, they have a lot of water, and they're using that water to come up with green energy, renewable energy. And I think Ethiopia, for instance, was mentioning how they set themselves a target of planting, I think it was 1 million trees in, you know, and they surpassed that target. And even us as a country, we saw recently how there's a drive from the Minister of Tourism to plant trees.
10 million trees.
10 million trees, and that has been going very well. Yes. But also, what I like as a country now, we are also exploring the green energy, the renewable energy space on a very serious note. Because clearly, if you look at what is happening next door with the challenges of power, and it is not looking good. Yeah. But also, it's important that we preserve our countries for the next generation. You know, because the effects of this climate change is actually not pleasant. You know, when you look at you know what is happening, even in plowing seasons, things have changed. I mean, in 1 week, you have had more than 5 climatic conditions. Yes. It started hot, it rained, and 2 days ago there was hailstones.
Yes.
So that clearly is an indication of, climate change. So I think what came out was that let's work on sustainable economies. Harnessing green energy. Let's just go green.
Yeah.
Even organic farming. Let's pursue that route. But that's why I started with saying it is a pity that now the whole world is now victim of aggressive industrialization by many other countries.
Yeah.
And now when we are wanting to use, for instance, Eswatini, we have very high-grade coal, that we need to be using our coal for thermal power plants.
Yeah.
So you are having to now look at, are you able to use your resources? But also I think just maybe, let me digress once again, on the issue of the African continent, on the minerals. The discussion was that let us use what we have to develop our economies. Let us use, if we actually use what we have, I don't think we'll have such an issue of unemployment.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Africa has become a continent, is a continent that produces for other continents.
Unfortunately.
And unfortunately, the world was structured in such a way that we should not industrialize. We should not use our own resources to develop our own, but we should be, one, a fruit basket for other continents. One, we should be a mineral, a resource base for other continents. That is why I started off by saying Africa needs to wake up and smell the coffee and decide, you know what, we will rise up and we will take care of our citizens because, honestly speaking, nobody has the interests of Africa except for Africans. True. Unfortunately, Africans seem to believe that somebody somewhere has their interest. It is not. And I talk to you as a young person to say, a lot of young people are being given, allow me to say, ideologies. They're being given mandates, to stand against their own countries in preference for what you will not even be allowed to go to.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, and so let's look within. Let's build our countries.
Yeah.
Let's build what we have, and you have what it takes as young people.
Thank you so much, Senate President. I think that also speaks to, the advent of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, that we need to grow up and grow ourselves and invest in ourselves as Africa. And I love that pragmatic approach and how you eloquently put it. I was also, interested in an excerpt by His Excellency, the Prime Minister, Cleopas Dlamini's remarks, where he spoke about the retreat having come at an opportune time where we need to share experiences and strategies. You've alluded to that already, but to come up with practical solutions on how we can continue to collaborate in order to ensure that we sustain world peace. You've touched on that again when you spoke on the fact that, young people are being, I would say, imposed with ideologies that make them turn against their own homes, which then affects them in the long run. But they don't see it because they are short-sighted on the internet and everything that's going on in the Internet of Things. But the collaboration in order to ensure that we sustain world peace and bring our people out of the abyss of poverty as Africa, I think that's very important. May you elaborate on the discussions around bringing Africa out of poverty and sustaining world peace?
Thank you. His Excellency, maybe before I talk about His Excellency's comment, may allow me to just mention what His Majesty King Mswati III said to the nation when he came back from Zimbabwe, from his trip from the Republic of Zimbabwe. He said we need to be trading within ourselves. He's speaking again the Pan-African mandate to say, let Africa unite. Africa, trade with yourself. Do not keep looking outward where you will be told this can come, this cannot come. There is so much resource, there is so much wealth. I mean, Africa is a continent. We have a population of 1.2 billion. Honestly, 2018, His Majesty actually said, if you were selling even something for 1 cent to 700 million, I mean, clearly,
That's a lot of money.
Just 1 cent, nothing else.
Yeah.
So it's to say, let's make use of what we have, the population that we have. Africa has a big population. So on what His Excellency said, yes, it is indeed strategies that we are looking at. As ASECA, they were actually discussed at length to say it's more the collaboration. I mean, I'll keep repeating that. It's more the collaboration and to say, you know what, trade, for instance, now the Kingdom of Eswatini has an airline, Eswatini Air, and it goes direct to Zimbabwe. And His Majesty actually said, let's trade, let's come and see the opportunities in Zimbabwe. So again, we need to rise up. Another person will say, but nobody's giving me. Hey, on planet Earth, you rise up and use your brain. Use what God has given you, your talent. Use, there are certain skills that you have. Let's move within. Even every delegate was coming and saying, you know what, you need more routes that will go to other African countries. Invest in your air freight, invest in your air transportation, because we need to open up. For instance, there are delegations that did not make it because, yes, Saudi Arabia, for instance, and yes, I'll quote Saudi Arabia, because they had confirmed they had a big delegation. And because of visas, touching on another country before coming here, they cancelled the night before they. So these are the things where you see the importance of, I'll tell you something, Africa as a continent is not connected. It is easier to go from Africa to Europe or Africa to anywhere else than to go from here to Ethiopia, to go to anywhere. So again, these are things that have been worked on that need to be unlocked. They need to be unlocked.
Certainly need that.
I'm passionate about that. They need to, that's why I'm saying Africa has to arise. His Excellency said, we need to come up with strategies to come out from abject poverty in Africa. And these are the strategies that we're looking at. We are counting on our young people to say, young people, you have what it takes. By the way, part of what has led to so much unemployment is the digitalization of our economies. In times past, you'd have 10 people doing a particular job, but now only 2 people.
And a computer.
And the computer. So what does it mean to our young people? It means retooling. It means reskilling. It means looking at what does industry need. What is actually marketable right now, as opposed to saying my subject combination allows me to do humanities. No, let me look at what is needed, and then I study the relevant course. For instance, ICTs are the way to go, because as we are getting into the 4th industrial revolution, clearly that's the ICTs. So if you have your law, which is good, if you have your humanities, which is good, there's no harm in retooling.
And you saying that is a great opportunity for our viewer at home, especially the young people, as you've alluded. We had the Career Expo kicking off yesterday, and when Fanele Chester from the Knowledge Institute was presenting, she spoke on the fact that young people need to reskill themselves and have a clear approach to what they want to pursue as a career. And I think it's very important to what you're saying. I have about 8 minutes remaining with you, Senate President, and I have 2 questions, and I'm afraid we may not need to elaborate too much on these ones. Let's start with the one where you spoke on the fact that when you came here last week, you will be collaborating with 2 ministries, the Ministry of Tourism and the Commerce Ministry, as well as SEDCO and the Eswatini Investment Promotions Authority. What were you working on exactly, and are you happy with what transpired?
Yeah, thank you very much. The Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Tourism did a marvelous job, because on the last day we had a dinner, a farewell dinner, but it was more a business dinner. And basically through APA and SEDCO, they were presenting opportunities that we have in the kingdom. I mean, if you have 19 countries, you might as well present. And they did. And Business Eswatini, they presented the opportunities that we have. As a result, there were bilateral meetings already saying, please explain more to us, we would like to come and invest. And Minister of Tourism then prepared a program for an excursion the following day, wherein they went to look at different places like our industries, to look at tourism sites, which they were very pleased about. Yeah, that marketed the country.
And
greatly.
you had mentioned a lot of our hotels were fully booked through this meeting as well.
Yes.
Our parting question is my favorite one. We note that, with interest, by the way, we note that there were signings of 2 memorandums of understandings. May you give us a brief on these MOUs that were signed and how they will benefit our parliament and our nation at large?
Great. We signed an MOU with the Kingdom of Morocco.
Okay.
Following a benchmarking exercise that we did like a few months ago. And again, mainly it's exchange of knowledge.
Yeah.
It's training for our staff, parliamentary staff, and also, even knowledge sharing of our politicians. That was with Morocco, because we observed that the way they have structured their parliaments, for instance, they have, international relations as a department, fully equipped, that gets a parliament to interface with other parliaments. And also we have communication, which is it's a department that is fully equipped, and then it's more really training and exchange of information. And already we've been in discussion with the Speaker of the Kingdom of Morocco that we need to start identifying and start the program immediately. And Rwanda is a marvel in the African continent. Rwanda, what I picked from there is excellence. First of all, it's unity of purpose. If we as a Maswati can decide we want to build our country, we want to build this great nation, be intentional and be resolute. This is what we want to do. That's what Rwanda did. United. And then also be accountable. Let's be accountable. Let's not, even the way people are getting into jobs, let it be on merit and not just, you are my cousin. No. Time for that is over. Get to the job and show up and do an excellent work so that you do not grieve other people. Can you imagine having someone maybe who is your boss or something, and that person, really has no proper work ethic? Rwanda, the work ethic is amazing. Is amazing.
Senate
and
President,
thinking big.
Appreciate you. We are very honored having you on the show. Pleased to interview you as well. We've run out of time. We thank you so much for joining us. I want to part this interview quoting 3 words that you just mentioned: intentional, resolute, and accountable. We hope that as you take all these policies and legislations and all the MOUs that you signed to undertaking and implementation, we take into account these 3 words that you mentioned as we build our lovely nation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Senate President Pastor Lindiwe Dlamini, who has just joined us yet again for the second time in 2 weeks. We're very grateful for that. Just giving us a brief highlight of what went down, what rather transpired during the ASECA retreat. We thank you so much for joining us. We've run out of time, so we'll take a quick ad break. When we return, we'll wrap up the show with my co-host Lungalele. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back on the show. Lungalele, thank you for joining me yet again. Thank you for joining us on the show. Lungalele, you spoke on, I'm joking. We've come to the end of the program today. Join us again tomorrow as we talk about health issues. We hope that you will get educated on health issues. We should, Lungalele, have people coming from the cancer department in the country just to speak on the HPV vaccine rollout, which is going to be, the exercise is going to take place really soon. Njengoba ke baveta emavikini laphelile masikhuluma nabo ukuthi seyivele ifikile imijovo nje sekushoda ukuthi baye esikolweni sifuna ukukhuluma ngalo ke lo hlelo lolu naletinye tindzaba tempilo.
Right, sima khulu tsini bana tsomplex eni sanibona kusasa nisale kahle.